Hello, vinyl community. This is Tommy in North Carolina, and I want to tackle a subject today that is near and dear to my heart. I want to talk about the genre of power pop, which is a very broad term used to describe a type of music. I've got some friends of mine that don't quite understand the term power pop. Most of you probably in the vinyl community know exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about power pop music. But just to give a broad description, it's a type of music or a style of music. The phrase was actually, I believe, coined by Pete Townsend around the time they were doing the Who Sell Out and some of those later 60s singles. Around 67, 68, he kind of described what they were doing as power pop, and you probably could describe that. But what he was using as the phrase was pop music with a little power, with a little heaviness to it. I think the term really became more widely known in the 70s, or if it was a genre that was described, it was in the 70s. But it was bands that kind of did a throwback to 65, 66 era Beatles. Usually I would say heavy guitars, heavy melody to describe it. And like I said, there's a lot of groups that kind of fall into that category. Matthew Sweet is an artist that came out in the 90s, that the song Girlfriend. That's a great example of what I would call power pop music, if you want a description. But I'm going to talk about a few power pop groups and albums that I quite enjoy. And if it's a genre that you're not really familiar with, maybe some of these albums would be something you want to check out and listen to. A lot of them you probably know, but like I said, I'm going to call this the power pop episode. So let's dig in and see what examples I've got. First off, I'm going to start off with a band, funny enough, directly related to the Beatles because they were on the Beatles' Apple label. This is Badfinger, and this is the album. This is the album Straight Up, which is one of their better albums, and it definitely goes into the power pop genre. This and No Dice really kind of describe the power pop thing, but it's got their version of Baby Blue, which a lot of people know that song. And songs like Day After Day. This album was produced by Todd Rundgren, who we'll get into in a little while. But this and No Dice, which I don't have on vinyl, unfortunately. It's the one with the lady with the with the on the front cover doing this or whatever. You've probably seen it. But Badfinger is an early example of what I would call power pop music. A band that came out in the 70s, was kind of getting away from the prog rock thing, but they also were not quite as light and easygoing as sort of the singer-songwriter people. Here's a band from the 80s that I think fall into the power pop category, the Bangles. The Bangles kind of started out as kind of a unique thing because they were an all-girl band, kind of like the Go-Go's. But Susanna Hoffs really has a lot of nostalgia to the 60s and a lot of her sounds in songs and things. So this band is kind of jangly and a lot of fun. And this is their album Different Light, which has some of their biggest hits, Manic Monday, also Walk Like an Egyptian, and the song Different Light. But also this has a cover song of a group that we're definitely going to get into in just a second. A song called September Girls, written by Alex Chilton. And we'll talk about September Girls in just a couple of seconds, because I'm kind of going a little bit in alphabetical order. The next example I would say is a power pop. This is a more recent record. This is Brendan Benson, What Kind of World? Brendan Benson, a lot of people know Brendan Benson as the other half of the Raconteurs with Jack White, which is more of a Led Zeppelin-style rock band. But Brendan Benson on his own is more what I would call power pop. And any of his solo records, good guitar music, and Brendan writes really, really fun songs. And so Brendan Benson is a more recent example of power pop. Now going back to the Bangles example, this is I would say the ultimate power pop band. On the Ardent label out of Memphis, Tennessee, Big Star. A lot of music people know Big Star's music and know a lot about Big Star, and they have a lot of fans. So there's not a whole lot I can say about Big Star. Most people know Big Star for the theme song to that 70s show In the Street. And so that's how Big Star is kind of known. This is their first album that came out on Ardent. You can easily find, this is a reissue. You can find the reissues out in the wild at a pretty reasonable price. And anybody that doesn't know the music of Big Star, you should definitely check them out. They're one of my favorite bands. This album was an album that featured two members of the band, Alex Chilton and Christopher Bell. There's Chris Bell right there, and there is Alex right there. You also had Andy Hummel and Jody Stevens on drums. And that band, like I said, they formed in Memphis, and it was really interesting in the middle of that soul music and all the things that were going on in Memphis around that time. You had this group that was performing really mid-'60s Beatles Anglo music, which was quite interesting. Chris Bell left the band, and this is their second album, Radio City, also on Ardent. It came out about a year later, so the band was reduced to a trio by this point. But Chris Bell was still heavily involved in this album, and so either one of these two Big Star albums are definitely must-haves for fans really fans of music. But to me, those are, if you were going to put albums in a time capsule and say this is power pop, Big Star would definitely be the definition. They cover all the bases of what power pop is. And just on a side note, Chris Bell, he has a solo album called I Am the Cosmos, which was comprised of solo stuff that came out. This is the Four Men with Beards issue. This album just got reissued yesterday on the Omnivore label, who's done a lot of Big Star stuff in the last few years. And so I'll probably be getting that and checking it out, but this is the one that I've got right now. But the song I Am the Cosmos was later covered by the Posies, another power pop band, probably from the 90s, that identified as power pop. But definitely the two Big Star albums and Chris Bell, they're great albums anyway, but they kind of cover the power pop. And sort of just tying in with that, who did the cover of In the Street for the that 70s show, Cheap Trick. Now, Cheap Trick's not really what I would call a classic power pop band, but this album, Heaven Tonight, definitely falls into the power pop. This is their third album, and the songs definitely fall into that kind of, power pop genre, or what I would call power pop. It opens with the song Surrender, which is just a catchy, fun song. And this is right before they did the Budokan album, which the live album that kind of broke them out. Another band that didn't start out as a power pop band but became kind of a power pop band is the Flamin' Groovies. Now, this is a compilation of Skydog singles, which was a label which I picked up, and this has some good power pop versions of songs. But I would highly recommend Jumping Into the Night and Shake Some Action. Those are quintessential power pop albums. I unfortunately don't have those on vinyl. They're hard to find and kind of expensive, so that's one of those. Now here's a band probably not many people know about. This is on the Car label, which actually was one of the labels that did some of the Chris Bell solo stuff, I believe. But this is the Michael Guthrie Band. This is a band out of Athens, Georgia, and I think maybe Michael Guthrie's still active around there. The reason I know about the Michael Guthrie Band is when I lived in Athens for a little while, where I met my friend Sean in New Orleans. Hi, Sean. He actually lived in Athens for quite a while and went to the University of Georgia. And we kind of discovered the Michael Guthrie Band because the record store we worked at was managed by a drummer, Brent Cash, which I'll talk about some of his albums at some point. He does some really good music, Brent Cash. If you're into like Sunshine Pop and that kind of stuff, I highly recommend Brent Cash, his music. Look him up. If you don't know him, you definitely should. But he played drums with the Michael Guthrie Band. But this is a collection of stuff that came out in the early 80s. I think it's on a German label. And you can find copies of this, particularly in the Athens area. I think I ordered this several years ago directly from Michael Guthrie's website when he had it, and it was a sealed copy. But direct hits, it's a great power pop record. Now we're going to go back to Memphis for just a second for another band that recorded on the Ardent label, same as Big Star. which was a subsidiary of Stax, by the way. This is a group called the Hot Dogs. Bill Rainey and Greg Reading, I believe, are their names. But the Hot Dogs, this album kind of got swept away because, you know, it lived in the shadow of Big Star as an artist. But a lot of the same familiar names are on this, particularly Terry Manning, who's a big power player in Memphis. This album may not be directly a power pop record in the same vein that Big Star is, but I want to piggyback that by pointing out their ardent single of Thanks with I Walk the Line. And this is one of my very favorite 45s of all time. I can't, it's a promo copy, I can't recommend enough their version of I Walk the Line. I think it is a quintessential power pop version of that song. It starts off pretty standard, and it goes into territories that are just phenomenal. I love the Hot Dogs version of I Walk the Line. And this single was actually sold to me and recommended to me by Greg Cartwright, who used to have a record store in Memphis called Legba Records, and I used to go in there, and he knew me as kind of a power pop guy, and he had a copy of this and played it for me, and I fell in love with it. A lot of you know Greg Cartwright. He's in a group called The Raining Sound, another Memphis band that I can't recommend enough. They're really great, but Greg Cartwright was in the Oblivions. It's funny, he relocated from Memphis to Asheville, and I run into Greg quite a bit here, you know, record circles and things, and he's a super cool guy, and he's a big fan of music, and like I said, that was turned on to me by him, and it is an awesome single, I Walk the Line by the Hot Dogs. Another one of my favorite, I would call this a power pop album. This is The Knack, Get the Knack. Some of you saw this one recently featured on a video that I did, because this is the double Wally pressing of Get the Knack, their first album. This band had, to me, from what I understand, when they came out, they were hyped as the next Beatles, so on and so forth. I think this album came out in 79. It has the hit My Sharona. But, you know, it's a fun album. It's got a lot of great hooks, and it's just a good album to listen to. And I like it. I think there was a lot of blowback from this group when they came out. A lot of people were really anti-Knack. I think there were buttons that said Nuke the Knack. So there was a lot of hatred for this band, you know, when this album came out. And My Sharona, of course, was a huge hit. But this album, it holds up, and it's a fun record. This is another one I grabbed recently, but it's a good power pop album, Phil Seymour. And this is, I think it came out in 80 or 81 on the Broadway, Boardwalk label. And this is just a fun power pop album. Power pop, to me, really had a lot of good stuff that came out in that sort of 78 to 82 range. But there was a lot of strange things going on in music, because you had punk music and then stuff that kind of fell into post-punk and a lot of stuff. But I think power pop really flourished. I think Big Star was sort of rediscovered. And so there were a lot of bands that were coming out that really paid homage to that sort of style. They weren't quite punk bands because they were too melodic and maybe too smart. They didn't have sort of the sneering attitude that some punk artists have. But, you know, again, power pop, fun songs, easy and whatnot. Another one of those bands in that period, and there's quite a few in the next group here, are the Shoes, which is a band I wasn't familiar with until, and this is on the Elektra label. This was a band that I wasn't familiar with at all until someone compared My Old Man, Lately David, who is also kind of a power pop band, to Shoes, and I thought, well, you know, I hope that's a compliment, and it was, because you know, this is a band that I sort of discovered when I was listening to a lot of power pop music, and so there you go. And this is another one that was recommended to me by Greg, Dwight Twilley Band, Sincerely. And this is on the Shelter recording, which was, I believe the label was at Denny Cordwell, who was involved with Tom Petty. There's a lot of connections there, but Dwight Twilley was definitely a power pop guy. But funny enough, Dwight Twilley also, the Dwight Twilley Band, it's just two guys here, but it was Twilley and Phil Seymour. So those two were connected early on, so you can kind of see where it's connected on that one. But those early Twilley records are fun power pop records. Another one in that era and in that vein, a band called 2020. Now, this is another one of those groups I think I read on the Portrait label from Epic. This was one of those bands that, again, I read about in a magazine somehow, and they were kind of lumped in with the Knack, another group in that genre. And I had an LP that got destroyed. Was Paul? Oh my goodness, is it Paul Williams' Beat? The Beat is what they were called. Rock and Roll Girl. Another power. I've got it on CD. I had a vinyl, and it, like I said, it's gone. Unfortunately, I wish I had it. But again, 2020, The Beat. Those are really good power pop bands. Going back to Todd Rundgren. Todd, to me, had some songs that were considered power pop. Couldn't I just tell you off Something Anything? But his band Utopia, which was really a prog rock band, by the late 70s and early 80s, they were doing more of a power pop thing. This is an album they did called Deface the Music, which is funny enough. It's a little Beatles, but kind of throwback look there. But they got a little bit into the power pop genre. There's about 3 or 4 records, Swing to the Right, Deface the Music. Those records definitely fall into the power pop genre. And finally, another band that I would probably call power pop, Weezer, particularly early Weezer. This is the Blue Album produced by Rick Ocasek of the Cars. This definitely gets out of the sort of 90s grunge thing. And not all of Weezer's power pop or what I would call power pop. This album may fall into that. Probably the Green Album. I mean, Pinkerton kind of is an early version of emo, maybe. I don't know. We can discuss it below, because, I mean, there's a lot of, stuff that I'm probably leaving off that you guys probably would say falls into power pop. Like I said, there's artists like Matthew Sweet, Teenage Fan Club. Those groups, there was a big resurgence of power pop in the 90s. And so a lot of those records either are very hard to find on vinyl or whatever. I know those albums, and I like quite a bit of them. Fountains of Wayne is another one. And to me, Fountains of Wayne kind of ties in with Weezer as well. I just don't have those records on vinyl. Either they're long out of print or they haven't been reissued. Things like that. I will get them if they do come back out, or if I can find good copies. But I know they're out there. But like I said, sometimes they're just way out of my price range. But like I said, power pop's a genre that kind of can be argumentative. Like someone tried to explain to me that Chris Isaak was power pop music, and because, well, he's melodic and he's kind of throwback to the 60s and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but Chris Isaak's not power pop. So it's become a joke about their favorite power pop artist, Chris Isaak. Like I said, not true. Power pop may be a feeling. I don't know. Like I said, feel free to discuss, like and comment. I appreciate you guys subscribing and interacting. I try to interact with as many of you as I can when I get a comment or anything. So let me know what you think. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's TommyBurton75. You can go there and follow me, and I usually post what I'm listening to and everything. I did go to a Friends of the Library sale today and picked up a couple of classical records and some CDs. Nothing really to jump about, but it was cheap, so I picked them up, but not worthy of a video. There was a record show in Greenville today, and I did not go to it because the pocketbook just was not going to allow it. I did the big sale a few weeks ago, in Asheville, and I think there's a record show coming up in Asheville that I might try to get to. But either way, if you did go to that show, let me know what you found and what you thought. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon.